Okay, after Washington left office, it was time to elect a new president. And this is going to be the first time in our history that we're going to have the start of political parties. So in 1796, the first two political parties were formed. They were the Federalists versus the Democratic Republicans. The Federalists were led by Hamilton, and they believed in a strong national government, loose interpretation of the Constitution, which we've talked about before. Loose interpretation of the Constitution basically means that just because it's not listed as a power within the Constitution for the government does not mean that the government cannot create this power based on the elastic clause, which says anything that is necessary or proper for the good of the nation. The third is the Federalists favored a national bank, obviously, because Hamilton is the leader of the Federalist Party, and he was the one who created this idea of a national bank. Lastly, they wanted an economy based on manufacturing. Hamilton believed manufacturing was vital to the heart of the nation, and it would be the fastest way for us to become a powerful, wealthy nation. Okay, the second group were the Democratic Republicans, and they were led by Jefferson and Madison. The Democratic Republicans believed in a limited national government. They wanted a government that limited the power of the federal or national government, and they wanted the states to retain a large amount of power. They believed in strict interpretation of the Constitution, which means that they believed that if it didn't say the power was granted within the Constitution, then it could not be added by the government. They opposed the national bank. Jefferson believed the national bank was unconstitutional. And then they wanted an economy based on agriculture. Jefferson wanted a small country that relied on farming and wanted farmers to be the backbone of our nation. So the election of 1796 puts Adams against Jefferson. Adams is going to run on the Federalist ticket, and Jefferson's going to run on the Democratic-Republican ticket. And Adams is going to marginally win the election by 2 electoral votes, and Jefferson's going to take the second highest number of electoral votes. So Jefferson, based on the Constitution at that time, Jefferson is going to become Adams' vice president. They are political enemies at this point, opponents, and now they have to work together. Adams as second president and Jefferson as his vice president. Now, Adams was not a very popular man prior to becoming president. He had done some things that people had disagreed with and had become angry over, and he is going to have a difficult time as president as well. He first is going to face some major problems with France. Okay? France is going to begin to seize the U.S. ships. France wanted America to get involved in the war going on between them and England, and under Washington, we had declared neutrality, and Adams wanted to also remain neutral. So the Federalists, which was his political party, called for war. They wanted war, but Adams wanted a peaceful negotiation. This is going to lead us to the XYZ affair. Basically what happens is Adams thinks that he can negotiate a peaceful treaty with France and get them to stop seizing our merchant ships. So he sends over 3 men, 3 American men who are supposed to go over to France and set up a meeting and have a meeting with the Prime Minister in France and kind of negotiate some sort of peaceful reconciliation. When they get there, our 3 American men are met by 3 Frenchmen who later become known in history as X, Y, and Z. So our guys meet with X, Y, and Z from France, the French agents, and the French agents tell our men that the Prime Minister will meet with them, but in exchange for a meeting, America has to pay France or loan France $10 million for their war, and then we have to pay another $250,000 to the French Prime Minister. So basically, they're bribing us for a meeting. The American men say, absolutely no way, we will not be bribed, and they come back to the United States. It gets out that this happened, and of course, Adams fully supports the men not taking the bribe, but it just kind of starts this big spiral downward. Once America finds out about the bribe, they are ready to go to war with France over it, and Adams still does not want to go to war. He wants some sort of peaceful negotiation. Other issues that Adams is going to face while he's president, the first one are the Alien and Sedition Acts. We had a lot of immigrants coming in at that time, and as they were coming in, a lot of immigrants sided with the Democratic-Republican Party. So Adams decided that he was going to create a series of laws targeted towards the immigrants, or the aliens, which means non-U.S. citizens. And there were acts such as an increase in the number of years you had to live within the United States to become a U.S. citizen. It went from 5 years to 14 years. He also just created several laws against the immigration population. Very strict, very harsh laws that many, especially the Democratic Republicans in Jefferson, strongly opposed, felt they were violating their rights. And then he created the Sedition Acts because most of the newspapers at that time were Democratic-Republican-based newspapers, so they had a sort of a bias towards the Democratic-Republican Party, and Adams wanted them to stop criticizing him. So he created the Sedition Acts, which basically said you could not print or write anything negative about the president or the government at that time. So obviously, many felt that this was a violation of our First Amendment right, freedom of press. Another issue, and so this was negative. Adams had a lot of negative feedback about these acts. The second one, however, the Convention of 1800, right before Adams leaves office, this is at the end of his term, he finally creates a peaceful treaty with France, basically saying France agrees to stop seizing our merchant ships. So this was a success. But by this point, people are so fed up with Adams that it's not really going to matter when it comes to the next presidential election. Last thing Adams did, the election of 1800, Adams lost to Jefferson. And so Adams knew that he was going to have to resign his office in March to Jefferson in March of 1801. And so that time period between when Jefferson was elected and when Jefferson was inaugurated, actually became president, Adams created the Judiciary Act of 1801. And in it, he created a lot of new federal courts, and then he appoints as many federal judges as possible before leaving office. These were called midnight judges because it's believed that he was actually appointing them up until 11:59 of the night before Jefferson's inauguration. So you wonder, why would he do that? Well, it's simple. He wanted Federalists to become the judges of these federal courts. One of the president's greatest powers, if they get the chance to, is to appoint federal and Supreme Court judges. That allows them to have a lasting impact on our country even after they're gone, and sometimes long after they're gone. So the fact that he created these courts and then named Federalists to it is going to definitely anger Jefferson when he steps in. And there's going to be some issues that come about we'll talk about later. Adams also appoints John Marshall as the new Chief Justice before leaving office. John Marshall is going to serve 4 decades, 40 years, as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So this appointment by Adams definitely Marshall was a Federalist, definitely made a lasting impact even after Adams was long gone. Marshall is still going to be making decisions, and some of the most important Supreme Court decisions ever made were made as Marshall was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and we will talk about those as the year goes on.